So good afternoon. We are at the Sanborn Regional School District Policy Meeting for Wednesday, June 2nd, and I am calling the meeting to order. And we'd like to review the minutes from 5/11/21. Would anyone like to?
Do you have them? Were they distributed?
I thought they were sent out. If they were not, then I apologize. Then we will have to review them at the next.
Oh, that's fine. I apologize. I think that we dropped the ball on that. We got busy. Can we do 2 at the next meeting? Guess we're gonna have to. In all fairness, Heather did reach out to me about it and I just got way too busy and couldn't get back.
No, they're here.
Did Phyllis send them?
They're attached in the agenda.
Good job.
I thought I saw them.
Okay, we have a minute. We only have 2 policies, so it's not like we're in a hurry. If they're there, we can take a minute.
I'm just too busy talking to log on here, so sorry.
No problem. Phyllis wanted to move this meeting to 4:30 and I said, no,
Oh,
because then we'll have a half hour between to just, and we only had 2 items, so. Are you able to see them, Dawn? Are they there?
Yeah, I was
Okay,
just,
great.
I
You
thought
guys
I
want to
saw
take a minute
them.
to read them and then we can deal with them?
Yeah, I thought I saw it earlier, but then I
Good.
just wanted
I'm
to.
glad that was taken care of. Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
Power.
No, I don't know what the heck it was. It opened, that's all that matters.
Brian, I'm really excited because I think that my instrument's gonna be ready at the end of June.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
Cool.
I'm gonna get to go get it.
That's awesome. That's
Exciting.
cool.
I have a policy agenda from Phyllis, but that's all I have. Was there a separate email?
The agenda, if you go into the agenda, it says review of minutes 5/11/21. It's blue, and if you click on that,
Oh, it's
it.
a
Oh,
link.
hyperlink.
Anything blue is
It's a hyperlink.
hyperlinked in our work usually.
Sorry, I should have said that.
Okay.
Were you able to get it, Tammy?
Yeah, I wasn't looking for a link.
No, that's good to clarify, and I'll try to remember to do that.
I know, I knew what I was saying when I said it, so that was my fault for not clarifying. Because I knew what I was trying to say, but I didn't get it out clearly.
You said they were in there.
I said they were in the minutes, but I didn't clarify that it was a link you had to click, so that's all.
Well, now that I see it, because I printed it and it's highlighted in blue, I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you, me too.
Okay.
Did you move the minutes? Did I move them?
I
Or
don't,
were we waiting for me?
I don't think we moved it yet. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from May 11th, 2021, as written.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. So we have 2 policies to discuss today. We have JIC, which is student conduct, and then JICD, which is student discipline and due process.
I'll do a quick overview of why this was here, and Brian's here to talk about it I asked Brian to attend because he was going to be here for the board meeting, and I wanted him to talk about, the way this plays out. Really what it is that there's been a change in the law and discipline, and so the change in the law and the discipline goes into play for September. So in order to follow our process, we needed to review this evening. I did have the administrators kind of do a rush. They processing. They got it last week. They all read it. They made comments. I left some of the comments in there for you. Essentially this is all driven by law. So Heather did ask an important question, which is they seem kind of similar. And then once we looked at them more closely, she saw that JIC is kind of the statement of what goes on. And then JICD is the procedure for handling what goes on. It is a little bit cumbersome to have them both, but I think it's what the NHSBA recommended. It was good. I actually did a full hour webinar on this one just to make sure that I really understood it because it changes the suspension rules. And I think Brian and I would concur that although we agree with some of the intent, some of the practice of it feels like it might be tricky in the future, but we're going to have to work out how we're going to do some of these things like the behavior plans and other pieces that are in there. We'll have to set up a process. It's another unfunded mandate, essentially, is what this boils down to, is that if you have to develop a behavior plan for students that are receiving suspensions and discipline, that's a lot of paperwork and time. And we're going to have to figure that out. But first, the first step is the board adopts a policy that reflects the law, and then we work on the implementation. And so that's where we are. I mean, I would say that it would probably be best for this one if we agree to forward it. I will ask the board to do a first and second read because it's law-based and I need time this summer to implement, to prepare for the implementation. Do you agree with that, Brian? So that it's fully adopted at the end of June so that we have it ready.
Yeah.
I don't like to do that very often, but I think with this one where it's kind of like the special ed one that we're doing. And I just found out about this whole thing a couple of weeks ago, so we moved it as quick as possible.
Yeah, and in this case, starting with the recommended policy language that comes from the School Boards Association makes sense because it is pretty significantly different from what we've been doing. Any of the possible edits or revisions we recommended were minor things, really, that I don't think changes the spirit of it. There's definitely another element with the process piece that we have to figure out after, once this is settled. And it will come into play when we start having student issues that we need to handle discipline action with. And now we've got to work with this, and it gets dicey quickly. I don't think there's anything in here inherently that I fundamentally disagree with on principle. I think it's because I've long felt like discipline should not be if you do this, this is what happens. If you do this, this is what happens. Because usually this is what happens is exclusion from school. And that's really a hard one for us to work with. We have so many parameters with kids with IEPs and 504s that you can't just exclude them from school. And a lot of instances where excluding from school actually makes a problem worse. Sometimes not, but sometimes it does. So having this system that will force us into looking at things through the lens of what have you tried, and now at the next level, what do you try at the next level? It's not a bad thing in theory, but Tom is correct that over time it is going to add processes, paperwork. I think probably down the road looking at additional training for staff, potentially some additional programming that we have to put in place that we may be obligated to do because, a family's going to have a right to be able to ask, what steps have you taken as a school? And we've got to be able to have tools in our toolbox to work with. So we don't know quite yet what that's going to look like. So don't need anybody to be worried tomorrow that we're looking for money or anything like that.
No, but we need to be transparent.
Yeah, just
This
be
is another
mindful.
unfunded mandate.
Absolutely.
And I think that just to piggyback off what Brian was saying, which is a very legitimate point, that when people ask me why is the cost of education going up, but our students are going down, processes is the biggest problem.
Right.
This is an example of us tying up an administrator, a guidance counselor, and other people to manage something that there's no funds attached to. And
Right.
This is a perfect example of it. And the other piece that I think is really important to reflect on as we move forward with this process is that there is a perception issue that may play into our other committee for public relations, which is this this issue of fairness.
Yep.
So so-and-so does X, Y, and Z, but they don't get kicked out of school.
Right.
And trust me, I'm all for collaborative problem solving or collaborative and proactive solutions. I'm a huge supporter of Dr. Green and his work. I've worked with him personally for 10 years. We are close friends. You couldn't have a bigger advocate to help kids solve problems, but there still has to be expectations and consequences.
Right.
And that's 50% of Dr. Green's model.
Mhm.
If you don't have clear expectations and rules, you can't raise them up to learn the lagging skills and unsolved problems to meet those expectations and rules. And the reality is that there are situations where the behavior is so egregious that being in school is not safe for others.
Mhm.
And I will continue to exercise that as needed, but it just, it makes it harder to do it.
It doesn't, right, and that's the thing, I'm not worried about the egregious stuff,
It's
that's
the
on
mid-level
that.
stuff that
It's-
causes the culture to deteriorate.
Correct, that's the key. So, like we do with everything else, we'll put our heads together and we'll come up with what we think makes sense and how we can use the staffing and the resources that we have to pull it off. But having said that, a lot of the language that you see in the policy, it does come directly from the law. So there may not be a lot of wiggle room as far as, what you want to have or not have in the policy itself.
So for example, the MTSS-B, is that something from the state or is that something that you guys currently use right now?
It's from the state.
Okay.
Yeah. We really didn't add much of anything. Most of what we have is sitting in the comments that you're looking at. I think with the exception of, like in the policy JIC, number 2, we added the restorative practices piece. That was not in the recommended language.
And it's part of what we do.
It's part of what we already do, yeah.
But it's congruent with the language, the rest of the language.
Correct.
That in some instances, that's an appropriate. Which one can we just take each one? Because I think, are we on JIC or JICD?
JIC.
Perfect, okay. So for this one, if you look down through the policy, there aren't a lot of black, just for process, Heather. I added the restorative practices in bold, and at one point I'd put in a little note. Typically what we do is this: we strike out anything that the NHSBA says to remove. We bold what they say to add so that you know the difference and you can see the original policy. And then I usually will add one color like red for admin additions so that you can see them. And I'd like to start sharing these digitally like this more, because we've shared them as PDFs in the past or paper or whatever. Does this work for you, Tammy, to see it this way? I'll refrain from, I prefer blue just because visually it works for me, but I won't use blue because Dawn's right that typically something that's blue in our work is hyperlinked. And there won't be hyperlinks in policies. You know what I'm saying? So someday our policy manual will be much shorter with all the adjacent policies hyperlinked, but no organization is there yet. So I think that
What is considered a restorative practice? I think that might be good to highlight.
yes.
Because parents might not understand, or a student might not understand what that might be.
Well, so that's more of your eye for an eye. That's a good question. That's more of your eye for an eye issue, right? You have 3 students who make a mess in the cafeteria, and the punishment is cleaning up the cafeteria.
Okay.
Because they're restoring or regaining the balance to something that they've disrupted in some way. So those are all your lower level, middle level. A lot of that falls into that genre.
Okay.
You know?
But when I hear restorative, I think of it in a positive connotation, like they can, like there's positive things that they're doing to like make up. So.
Yeah, so like it might not be that they just clean up the mess that they made. They may spend a week for 45 minutes a day cleaning the cafeteria, right? And contributing to the community.
Right.
It's that piece about, the restorative piece is about connecting to the bigger community and being a part of the community and recognizing how your behavior impacts it.
Yeah.
It's the attachment work, it's rebuilding the trust that was broken.
You got it.
So it could be with a teacher, you were disruptive in the classroom, the administrator goes to the teacher and says, what could this student do to help you because they've disrupted the environment today? And there needs to be a way to rebuild that, and the teacher might come up with suggestions. We have kids that are sometimes a part of that process in deciding what consequences might look like generically, not on a specific case, but trying to come up with a bank of restorative practices that could be drawn from. So we'd like to do more of that. I think it's a pretty powerful tool. That's something that Steve Krzyzanowski brought with him from Colorado and did a lot of work there with, and he's been pretty instrumental in getting it where it is today. So
He's done, the Black Hawk Tribe Institute, I bet. Cause that's big on.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Yep.
it's a modality that I've used at at other group homes. It's all about attachment and rebuilding and trust and restoring their sense of self and their efficacy, even if they make a mistake.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Anything else in this policy that you guys want to?
I actually had one other
This might be a
thing.
really silly question, but why is there like a blank code of conduct?
That's just what I was actually looking up right now. Tom, I think we can probably fill that in from the email, the document that you had sent us, where this originally came from. I'm trying to see what they had it as a footnote for what was recommended to go
Thank
in
you.
that space. Come back to me. Give me a minute, I'll find
Keep
it.
going. Is it a code of conduct manual or
Right,
handbook, or
right.
those are the typical?
It says no law or regulation requires something called a code of conduct. However, boards and schools are required to have a policy for rules of conduct and penalties for misbehavior, and those must be disseminated to parents and guardians. The sample policy uses the phrase code of conduct to reference the collection of board policies, school and district administrative rules and policy rules pertaining to disciplinary consequences. Any district who doesn't use the term code of conduct for such rules should replace with the district's own title. For example, expectations and standards of behavior and consequences. So my recommendation then might be that because we include these in the student handbook, and it's I'll tell you what we call it in the handbook. We should probably just use that language. Let me pull up the handbook. And then just replace it everywhere in the document where that shows up. Yeah,
Is it the same at every school? They prefer to?
it's supposed to be.
It will, if it's not, it needs to be.
Right.
So
Because that way, when you're in kindergarten, you're learning the same language and you're ready for high school. If they're changing that, that's not good. That's one of the things that we're working on is district-wide consistency.
Hmm.
And now that Memorial and Bakey are mixed with the K-2-3 school, it's a lot easier to figure that out. But boys, there are some inconsistencies, which is to be expected, that people have different language.
yeah, a couple of years ago, the principals, we all sat down over the summer and we looked at all of our handbooks to try to align a lot of that. So unless they've veered off track in the last couple of years, which some things happen. So
Back
student
before
code of,
COVID, when we did work on the
Yeah.
school.
so student code of conduct. So I think it would be appropriate to say those policies and rules should be included in the student handbook in a section called student, what did I say? Student code of conduct. That would probably be appropriate and then it would match.
Got it.
And that may even filter over to the other policy too, maybe not. Maybe not. Which again, that's what we do anyway. So this is a brand new policy that we don't have currently at JIC, but this is what we do anyway, so there's no concerns here.
Anyone else have additions on this one?
Sorry?
Are you good with this one? Is everyone good? We'll just need a motion to move it to the board for first and second read, please. If you're okay with that.
Move it to the board for first and second read.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Thank you. Do you want me to go on to JICD?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. So Brian had a good comment on this one, which is, this is kind of like the what you do when the other one occurs. And Brian, I didn't put in athletics, drama, music and all, because practices to me means those things, but I didn't want to negate the conversation. I think it's worth talking about. I think that if you have theater practice, it's still practice, band practice, it just practice means practice, I guess. Are you okay with that?
I'm totally fine with it.
Okay.
I'm trying, I try to think of it through the lens of when we have a semi-complicated student
Yeah,
issue.
no, I wanted to hear.
First thing we have to do is we go to read the policy, and then the policy maybe, hopefully gives us clarity. If it doesn't, then, now we gotta figure out what to do with that.
Would you
So-
like us to define practice as any activity that is athletic or,
I would say academic, athletic, or extracurricular.
thanks, that's perfect. Is that okay, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I think that, adding that doesn't take away from it, but it adds the element so that if we're in that boat, we can read it and say, yep, we're covered, okay.
I'm gonna say including but not limited to.
Because no matter where we are, they're always representing Sanborn.
Athletic, yep.
Yep.
Athletic, academic. And what was the third one, Heather?
Extracurricular.
How's that?
And/or, maybe, but yeah.
So, and maybe I'm just reading this wrong, so I'm confused by this. This confused me before and it still confuses me.
Mhm.
So it means restriction from school activities means a student will attend school classes, but will not participate in other school extracurricular activities, including such things as competitions, field trips, and performances. A student who has been restricted from school activities may participate in practices. So now we're saying that they can participate in the things that in the sentence before just said they couldn't participate in.
Yeah, this is.
It makes
this is
no
the-
sense.
yeah, yeah.
It's completely undoing the
I
sentence
think
before.
that we should, I think you're right, like, I think that, I don't like this.
It makes no sense. It's like you're either excluded from extracurricular activities or you're not. Like, it doesn't make sense. So that to me is like,
Which page are you on, John?
it's number 2. It's the JICD number 2, restrictions from school activities. That one completely, it says you can't participate in other school extracurricular activities. And then the next sentence says, a student who has been restricted from school activities may participate in practices.
I'm wondering if
Well-
it's a
It says
typo.
at the, there's one that says at the discretion.
Right,
of
and
the
it does
person.
say at the discretion of the person imposing the restriction, but it starts off saying they can't participate at all, and then it's saying, but it's
Right.
really at the discretion of the person. So
I agree, Dawn.
I feel like that's a huge area where we're gonna have very big inconsistencies. So I feel like it needs to be one or the other. I don't know. I think that's a huge area. We're gonna have some kids that are gonna get the hammers down because that person that's imposing the restriction is just not gonna let anybody participate in anything. And you're gonna have another person that's imposing that may be more lenient, and it may be for the same thing, but it's all upon who's imposing the restriction. So
Because
there, I see very,
it's subjective, so like
yeah,
one assistant principal might really go the hard line, but another one might not.
I don't want that left that open, I'm gonna call Will.
yeah, that to
But
me
if
is a
you-
huge issue.
It's the may feature though. It's not saying it has to be that
Right,
way.
this is the problem.
Yeah,
You do it and I don't.
right? And I see,
Then
no, I
it's
know
like
what
a
you're
cell
saying.
phone thing.
Right.
all
I know what
over
you're
again.
saying.
The cell
It is.
phone
I get it.
nightmare of Heather makes them put their cell phones, because you're a meanie, in the pocket at the front of the room, and Tom lets them have it. Whose class do you want to be in?
Tom's.
Right,
When you do a survey of the school, which teacher gets the good review?
right.
That's, I want surveys.
You just want to get the good reviews.
Yeah, exactly, and that's my point, is that it's not, it becomes a popularity contest. I
And
don't
this-
like that flexibility.
Right, and it also says in here, it says before ordering the restriction, the supervising employee, teacher, coach, director, principal ordering the restriction shall warn the student of the infraction and allow the student to respond. So they're having a chance to, I think, make amends or whatever.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they've gone through that process and they're still being restricted from school activities, I don't really feel like there's a way to then undo that consequence. You know what I mean? If they've been given a previous warning, I don't know. And that's,
I'm
I just
wondering
see
if it's a
it-
typo, to be honest with you.
it just makes no sense.
When I
to
read
me
this quickly,
whatsoever.
I just,
What do you, yeah, maybe, I mean, what do you,
maybe not, but
I don't know.
They specified practices, they were, they went out of their way to specify may participate in practices, which I would interpret as athletic myself.
Yeah.
Typically, that's, usually referred to a drama,
right?
Right.
that's what more of a
So-
rehearsal. So
I
is
mean,
there some
honestly-
reason why they wanted to exempt and allow participation in athletic practices as opposed to this competition, field trip and performances?
And I feel like
I'm gonna email Will right
Does
now.
seem-
I feel like
A
limiting
little-
the athletics is gonna be more powerful than maybe some of the other things
But-
there.
And I wonder if, you should reach out to Will, but I wonder if, again, what they're getting at is the premise of the policy is to provide more of a graduated approach to things, right? So in other
Right.
words, it doesn't go right from, now you can't do anything. There's the ability to say, you're not gonna be in the game, but you're still gonna go to practice.
Mhm.
Losing the game might be another level up. So like that's where, I think asking Will is a good idea because we need that to be weighed in. But remember, the next layer after the policy is written will be to make that student handbook language, because when we're operating with the kids, we use a student handbook. We refer to the policy really 2 times. One, when we're writing the handbook every year to make sure that what we're doing is aligned, right? And then 2, when we feel like the handbook is not clear enough for us and we want to go back to the original source to check it. So
Yeah.
if it comes back that Will says, like that, maybe that's my theory and it's right, that it's there so that you have that ability to make that graduated distinction, then I think in the handbook, we need to outline it so that the calibration will be there regardless of which administrators reading that handbook, they're interpreting it the same way. You know what I mean? So that we get that fairness piece that I think we're all looking for with the behavior.
All right, so we can approve this pending me talking to Will if we need to do that, right? So I can get the answers, share it with Heather and the rest of the group and figure it out.
So I'll get rid of my comment because we don't need it anymore.
Yeah, well, I signed it to myself. Wasn't that clever?
Yeah, I did see that. That's good.
Got an
It's
email.
better than.
Brian
assigning-
taught me how to assign things to people, so.
Yeah, and where.
But you're using it to give yourself more work, so you're using it appropriately.
Thanks.
Yeah, and where it says restrictions under this policy are not appealable, I think we have to be very clear about what this policy is saying.
Yeah.
Yep.
We have to be very, very clear.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, so the detention piece, I see what you're saying, Tom. Yeah, I was just specifying, we haven't run Saturday detentions
Yeah,
forever, but if we wanted to.
I'm not saying that we're going to do it, but I'm not saying that we're not going to do it. I literally have never spent any time on it or thought about it. You've experienced it.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to say that we're not doing it right now, but it says May, so I think we're good.
Okay. That's fine. You guys okay with that?
Okay. Did you resolve that, Brian?
I had to go to school on a Saturday.
You'll just tell me later what you did.
No, it wasn't detention. Remember, you were already graduated, but our senior year, we had to do 2 Saturdays.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it wasn't naughty, it was
Yeah, I
makeup.
remember that.
I just think of the Breakfast Club, sorry.
Yeah,
Me too.
it's a great movie.
I-
One of my
Listen,
favorite songs of all time.
Do you know that is off topic? That movie is a great movie to use when you're training new clinicians because it's all about like affect management and attunement skills.
well, I did go on a Saturday, but it wasn't to make up a day. So I'll tell you.
You'll
I'll tell you all.
have to
later.
tell me that story.
So Ryan,
so,
It says detentions are not appealable twice. Is that?
yeah, that's good.
I just get, and I know this is their language, but I get stuck on the fact that it's like, you're getting assigned detention, but you have to notify the parents and give 24 hours prior to the student serving detention. I mean, if the kid has to go to, so that mean they can't go to the responsibility room right away? If there's something that it's like, I mean, that, I have a hard
Yeah,
time
well,
with that.
I almost made a comment about that, Dawn,
Because
that's a
if
problem.
you don't deal with it right away, the student may not realize what they're being punished for if you're punishing them the next day.
Correct.
So I kind of struggle with that language, and I don't know if that's anything that can be worked
But is
on.
it detention different than the responsibility room? or the
Well,
planning
I don't
room?
know, because in here it said, at the elementary level, classroom detentions often take the form of our responsibility room and are assigned there. Because I don't know that there is detention after school. So I think the only detention we really have in this district, as far as I know, is like a responsibility room. And that's like an immediate, like, you're not following the rules, you go to the responsibility room. It's, you know, there's a action and then there's a reaction. You know, I don't,
Right.
I don't like the
Will.
24-hour, like, it just, especially at the lower levels, the students lose why they're being punished.
I think the purpose of the 24-hour rule is to give parents planning time to pick the kid up from school or to make adjustments for after school.
And
I
I
think that that's
understand
right, but I think you should say that,
that. Right.
right? That it
If it's
shouldn't,
an after-school detention, they
Right.
need 24 hours.
That would help, because sometimes even at the high school level, we might have an instance where, I don't know, 2 kids get into a shouting match because of something that happened outside of school and they swear at each other in class. And now they're sent out of class and we've got to deal with them. And the decision is they're going to need some time in the planning room as an in-school suspension, but they have the next class together. We're not going to send them to their next class together. One of them may be serving their part of their planning room time that day and the other one the next day so that they're off kilter
Right.
and they get a couple days break from each other, right? So that 24-hour thing would ruin our ability to do that.
so I just assigned myself more work to do, great.
Good job.
Thanks. I love these meetings. All right, I'll get on it.
Oh.
Sorry, I'm bringing all this stuff.
No, Dawn, this is super important. We need to really flesh this out.
Well, and that's,
Because it's gonna affect his every day.
Yeah.
Right? Which is why I asked Brian to be here.
and that, yeah, that's why I wanted to be here, because then when we're at the next level writing the revisions to the handbook, I need a better understanding of what isn't reflected in the policy that we need to make sure we
Right.
reflect in the handbook. Because I
Yeah.
think we're all on the same page as to what we want the outcome to be when we get to that point, you know?
And Brian, I wrote, yes, how is that? But it didn't read the way I meant it when I wrote it. I didn't mean it to be punky.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah.
Now that I'm rereading it, I'm like, yes, how is that? No, what I meant was, you know, I think discussed with the parent, I added in blue and I wanted to know, how is that?
Well, it doesn't, you already says discuss with the parent.
No, I added the blue.
Just added.
I should have
Parent
made it.
guardian shall be notified at least 24 hours prior to the administration of reassignment unless discussed with the parent.
Right. Unless we were trying to figure out what to do to break that 24-hour rule.
Unless.
Outside of school,
Unless that's with the parent in the moment or
Yeah,
day, because it says, it's basically saying you have to notify the parent unless you notify the parent.
right?
That's how I'm reading it.
right.
So 24-hour notice unless
Agreed upon with the parent?
agreed upon by the parent at the,
Unless the parent waives that,
Yeah, unless,
waived by the parent, I don't want to say waived though, because that shall be notified at least.
Unless the parent.
and do you guys
Consent, I'm
consider
thinking about
going
the
to the
words.
planning board and in-school suspension?
Well, we call our in-school suspension room the planning room because it serves more purposes than just
So I guess
for in-school suspension.
like my question is, so like, let's say my kid's being disruptive in class and they say go to the planning room, is that considered a suspension?
No,
No.
well, no, because, so in-school suspension kicks in, at some point, I'll sit down and say, Mommy, because of what you did, you're going to have an in-school suspension for X amount of time. Now, maybe it's time served, maybe you already did it, and this is part of the agreement, but now we're gonna actually say, this is in-school suspension time, it's gonna be in our student information system, so that when we do our state reporting at the end of the year, we do have to report the number of in-school suspension versus out-of-school suspensions. Right, so it works the same way with the responsibility room. You can have a responsibility room, they might be, a student may be serving the equivalent of a detention at the elementary level. Maybe they call it something different, that's fine, because their handbook can outline what they call it, but that's their form of a detention, so that the language, the idea of a detention is there. Because I would suspect with this policy, just like every other time the state adds a new law, they do some state reporting on it at the end of the year, and they're gonna use the term detention, and we have to be able to, translate what we call it to that.
Because I know, so just from a parent perspective, every time a kid is sent to the planning room, that's documented, but the parents aren't always notified. But then they get a letter at the end, like then they get info at the end of the year that they were sent to the planning board so many times, but the parents weren't.
I mean, the
so-
planning room.
Who's this?
You're saying planning board.
Sorry,
It's
planning
okay.
room,
No, I just want to make sure.
middle school.
At the middle school?
All right, we need to talk about that because that can't happen. Kids are being removed from the regular education setting and sent to a planning room or student support center. The parents need to be notified every time. That's a must
I think
do.
that'll shut down a lot of the planning room issues with being sent.
Yeah, except, right, I mean, sometimes, that's why we use the name planning room at the high school. I can't speak for the middle school, but we have kids who need extra academic support, and they have an agreement that everybody's in agreement that they can access it when they need to access it, right?
That's
So now
different.
it's not
You're being
discipline.
sent for disciplinary
Correct.
reasons.
Right.
It's,
Correct.
I think that's the difference, like utilizing it proactively is one thing, but when a kid is sent down and then not
Right.
getting told, but then get like report, like, oh, that sort of.
That's where this policy is gonna hopefully clean up
That's,
that.
and that's what I'm hoping.
Exactly, because now it's delineating and requiring a 24-hour period, unless or whatever we come up with, unless it's waived kind of thing, for that reason. I mean, here, we're a small school, right? So the person might be doing 3 different roles. You could be in the room for any 3 of those reasons. But at some point, now it's an official disciplinary, you're here because it's an in-school suspension that's being categorized that way,
And it does, and Tom did modify this, unless a parent approves the placement in less than 24 hours, which I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
But then it does down below that, say the building principal or his or her designee is authorized to issue reassignment restrictions from activities, blah, 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 for repeated failure to confront. And it doesn't specify that you have to give that much notice at that point. So I'm
Right.
thinking like this, the initial part is like a first offense, kind of like that's how I read it. And then after that, if this is a, student that's consistently, being sent for disciplinary action, it no longer requires, parent approval.
So it's your strike 1, strike
Yeah,
2,
so
strike 3.
I do like that,
Yep.
because that definitely helps out. I feel like that helps the
Yeah.
staff deal with things a little bit.
And I think that this is gonna be an interesting conversation with Will Phillips about what's law versus, because again, we are concerned about the practicality of some of these things, and this conversation is raising those very concerns.
Absolutely.
We cannot have a school where, so let me just play this out for you very quickly. 4th grade, students misbehaving, completely disrupting the academic environment. Teacher tries to redirect, uses responsive classroom models, collaborative problem solving. The kid is just like out of control. So the kid calls the office. Teacher calls the office. I need you to take Johnny down to the office. I can't teach. Johnny goes to the office. Principal has a conversation. What I see this doing is slowing down the first offense from going straight to the planning room and ensuring that conversation with the parent. And if the kid's gonna be an in-school suspension, AKA the planning room for 3 days because of whatever they did, like let's say they're throwing a chair at someone, then the parent has a day's notice. But the parent might still come pick the kid up that day. He's not going back to the class to just do whatever he wants. And we're not gonna supersede like common sense and liability for safety. right?
No,
In
it's-
any instance, like I'll deal with the lawyer and the policy
But I-
later if that
Yeah,
happens.
but I do think the elementary schools do a really good job with this.
They do.
Like the responsibility room, like, I assume Bakey has a similar setup responsibility.
They have a
room as
responsibility
Memorial.
on as well, yeah.
But they do a really good job with their planning, with their sheets, like, and the kids really,
Process.
so it's more like the middle school and high school, I think I worry about.
Yep.
With
Yep.
these types of policies than the elementary schools,
Yep.
because, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
and the part I worry about is this all sounds great, looks great, and then we don't have the resources to implement it correctly, and we miss steps. Now we have an issue with
That's
the
where we have to be
student,
very careful.
right? Now we have an issue with the student, and we need to suspend him, but instead, somebody's in there saying, well, you know, by policy, you skipped to strike 3, and what happened to strikes 1 and 2, you know, so.
But I think as we go down, it says if it's a certain.
Progressive.
Yes.
Yep, it is, yeah.
We may have Will Phillips do a training with the admins on this
That's a
before the
great
school year.
idea.
Yeah, or Jim's office or something. We'll get
Yeah,
something.
I think the Principals Association is doing some
Oh,
things
good.
too.
Okay.
And they'll be looking at some best practice strategies too, so
Okay.
it'll be a multi-pronged thing. It's definitely on everybody's mind, there's no doubt. Tom, on page,
I think they're numbered.
they're not, I was just, on E,
Yes.
Alternative education.
yep,
Wait, E?
yeah, the
Which E?
alternative, I know, there's a bunch of these. So.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Let me get to that E, because I was on.
Alternative educational services, yeah, there
Yes,
you go,
all right,
that
I'm
one.
there. Yeah.
How is that different from what we do now?
Because students that are in regular ed do not receive services if they're out of more than 20 days.
Right.
Cumulative days. It basically, this policy extends to the kids that don't have an IEP similar.
Right.
Similar, and the reality is this is less restrictive than special ed law because we don't have to put a comment. Heidi's made the right comment. Her point is well taken, but the law says that you have to, for students with an IEP, we have to give them after 10 days, right? So it's more restrictive. But there was nothing previously for students. This is where that unfunded mandate part
Yes.
kicks in,
Yeah.
right? If
So-
a kid's out for more than 20 days, we got to start providing them the tutoring. It's
Which,
basic. I mean, it doesn't say that, but that's what it means.
that's what it means, and that's why I was pointing it out, I kind of knew the answer, but I wanted to
I'm
make
gonna ask
sure
Will that one as well.
you guys were seeing that, because that, again, it speaks to the student does something egregious. The policy really says that we can exclude them from school, and this is saying, yeah, but you're gonna be providing what they need. So, you know, where that fits into the cost structure down the road, yet to be seen, but it's something to be thinking about.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we don't have tutors per se.
No,
We have some tutors that we scrape together, like we'll ask a teacher to tutor a special ed student who's been suspended. Sometimes we'll pay their case manager to do it overtime, not overtime, but like additional hours.
right,
Sometimes we'll pay a guidance counselor or a teacher. But the reality is that the key word is pay.
yeah.
It's not cheap, it's expensive. It's like upwards of $30 to $50 an hour to pay a professional
Yeah,
person.
when you have the FICA and retirement,
Mhm.
let's call it $50 an hour, and if out of an agreement is something that the student needs 2 hours a day, now you're talking about 10 hours a week for however long we're doing this.
You're
right?
gonna have to look at how many students we typically have suspended for more than 20 days in a year
Mhm.
and think about the budget impact of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's something that, for your level. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
see-
absolutely.
And again, I wanna be clear, like this district is not suspension crazy. we do a lot of really proactive things. I mean, I have had maybe 3 instances in 4 years that expulsion was truly on the table. 3. That's phenomenal, right? But on the other hand, the likelihood that 20 days of suspension occurs is not high, but more, right? Expulsion is big. Like 20 days though, a couple of fights and you're at 15 days.
Yeah.
You know, it happens fast.
Yeah.
But I don't know the data, so I would need disciplinary data to gauge the impact.
So that's something to think about.
And G for us is a non-issue because we never do that.
You never penalize.
No, oh no, if a kid's out for suspension, we give them all the work, and if they do the work, they're not penalized, but they have an opportunity.
They have the option.
Yes, they have the opportunity to do the work. I mean, that one's kind of interesting.
Well, even in the age of remote learning and Zoom, I mean, that became a question we had to address this year, and there was no policy for that. If you suspend a student from school, does that mean they can't log into the Zoom?
That's a big question.
Right? Everybody asks the question. Oh, that's a good question.
So my opinion is that when we come back to school in the fall, we do not have any kind of an MOA or agreement with teachers that would require them to Zoom their classrooms. And if we do that, we have to negotiate the impact. It's a big impact. I don't know if, like, I've been in a lot of classrooms lately, and when I met with the juniors and seniors and the 7th and 8th graders, I got a taste of what it's like to meet with a class of 20 students and have kids on Zoom, right? Because I had to do this 25 and 30-minute meeting with them and manage the kids on Zoom and the kids in the class. It's not like impossible, but if we're going to require people to do that for a long time, those are $1,000 a piece. We need to buy hundreds of them, right? Because that's how you have to do that. The owl camera turns if Tammy talks, and it focuses on her, and it has a room view. You can't have kids, like we have kids on a Zoom and they can barely even see the teacher, they're just hearing what's being said. I mean, it's the minimal, it is not adequate at all for like long-term solution. In the heat of a pandemic where we've never done this before, they've done phenomenal.
Yeah.
But if we're going to expect it, we have to back it.
Yeah, and it definitely impedes a teacher's ability to instruct in the best ways.
So my answer for now would be no.
Yeah.
Right? But it is a big question that has all kinds of like tentacles
I think
or
like snow days or.
snow days.
I think there are times where I think it can be implemented
Yep.
and implemented well.
I was thinking more that I wasn't so much, when I put actually, I should say we, because I know the comments all look like they're from me, but it was Matt, Steve, and I sitting in a room, and I just happened to be the note taker,
I knew you were the scribe. I could hear
yeah.
Steve and Matt's voice
Yes,
there.
but I think from this one, I think the bigger question was, the kids don't have to be on Zoom to participate in their class remotely, right? Like they can go into the Google Classroom, they can get all the work. The teacher might say, at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be asking students to be in a certain Google Doc, providing feedback. We're going to be working on an activity, and they can be doing that. They don't need to be logged into a Zoom to do that.
Right, or you could do on snow days, just quick 10-minute Zoom, no video check-ins.
Right.
Where everyone can hear or
Exactly.
see the screen. You don't
Exactly.
have to have your camera on.
Yeah.
But let's get it, for the purpose of just giving us all a quick restroom break between now and what might be a relatively long board meeting. Do you guys feel comfortable if I get answers to these questions moving this forward?
I just still feel like there's a few more pages we didn't get a chance to review.
Yeah, is there anything else that you want to ask about is why I was?
Duration of expulsion, I was under the impression once you were expelled from school, there was like no coming back.
That is a very, very interesting thing.
It says not less than 12 months.
Exactly. So what they're saying is that expulsion can be for 1 year, and I believe that's law related.
Okay,
But that's what it is now.
okay.
It's not forever,
Yeah, and we've,
but
yeah.
expulsion carries. So if I expelled someone from Sanborn, they aren't going to another school. You can't go to Timberlane. It
No, New
carries.
Hampshire.
In New Hampshire.
School.
So it has to remain for that 12 months.
So,
Okay.
and we have had instances of families where one parent lives in Mass and one lives in New Hampshire, and that's how they can circumvent. But we've also had instances where we've expelled a student, and 12 months later, they're back, they didn't do anything. We had one several years ago, did absolutely nothing for a year, and then came back, and guess what? They were just a year behind and even angrier. So, hence my point, I understand the need for the exclusion piece, but we have to have supports, otherwise we're not really solving the problem, you know?
Exactly. Back to Ross Street.
We have a friend that was expelled from Sanborn and ended up at Timberland.
Yeah, I was gonna say, back when we went to school, if you got expelled from Sanborn, you typically ended up going to Timberlane.
I can think of one that got expelled from Timberland.
It's been a while, ladies. It might not have been the same law back then.
No, I'm sure it's not.
No,
Because
Actually,
clearly-
the one I'm thinking about was
Clearly
in
it's not.
her graduating class, actually.
Great.
Think
Oh,
you and I-
yes,
You know which one I'm
I
talking
think I do,
From
actually.
Sanborn,
We could talk
the one
later.
that got suspended from Sanborn was in your graduating
Yeah.
class.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I think we were both 97, right? Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, they have a very small thing about if you have an IEP or disabilities, it's like this big.
Yep, the rules may be different.
which you don't, and you don't need any more than that, because that's always gonna supersede.
Yes.
Remember, federal law supersedes state law, which supersedes local policy and law.
I think everything else looks clear.
We just have some good homework as well now.
Yeah, well, and Tom,
It's fine.
it's all right. I will have some.
So would anyone like to make a motion to move it to the board for first and second review?
With the resolution of the outstanding issues.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you.
All in favor? Move passed.
There's gonna be a fair amount of discussion at the board level.
I think so, yeah, I agree.
I would, yeah, which is fine.
Yeah.
I get it.
I'll invite Will to the meeting.
That might be
That might be quite
very helpful.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised
Honestly,
if
Jim
the
might be
board
there
doesn't
anyway,
want to
so-
adopt
well,
certain
Yeah.
parts of this.
Do we have any future agenda items?
no, we're on summer break.
Summer break.
Right.
I'll be in touch.
Right, it's June.
It feels like March.
Well, you guys met all through last summer, so I want, you know.
Seriously.
I know that was.
Can we
like,
not
that
do that again, please?
I
Is that off?
think that was
Yeah.
COVID.
Oh, yeah, no, we're good. As
Oh,
soon
we
as
just
Dawn,
need to
you have to
adjourn.
adjourn.
This meeting is adjourned.